Copy, I'm in road therapy. 10-4-97.
I used to be a police officer in a pretty big city, which I won't name for my privacy and the privacy of the extended family of the people in the story. There's this one upscale neighborhood in our city with very nice homes. I was always told stories when I was a new officer that there was a doctor who used to live in one of those homes. The story goes, the doctor attempted to perform some type of operation on himself. He numbed his stomach to make an incision on himself, but since he couldn't feel it, he accidentally cut too far and too deep. When officers and paramedics arrived, he was found in his basement holding his own intestines, and, well, he ultimately died. Fast forward to the day I was assigned to a call about a young female who was found dead by her older sister. When I arrive on scene, it is this aforementioned nice neighborhood. When I exited my vehicle, I immediately had an uneasy feeling about the house. While it was nice on the outside, it just had a bad energy surrounding it. As I approached the front porch, I noticed piles of energy drink cans and a Ouija board on the front patio table. Everything about this house just felt wrong. When I was let inside, the family was obviously very distraught. I was told the deceased sister, we'll call her Claire, was in the basement. At this point, another officer had arrived on scene as well, so he stayed upstairs with the family as I entered the basement. The basement was unfinished and fairly dark, minus 2 pull-string light bulbs, one on each side of the basement. The scene in the basement was similar to the front porch, energy drink cans everywhere. Claire, who was 19 if I remember correctly, she was slightly swinging back and forth from an exercise band. Another officer on scene helped me lift her to bring her down. Claire's family consisted of her mother and father and her older sister. Her parents stated that they had been trying to get her help because all she ever wanted to do was drink energy drinks and stay up all night and play with the Ouija board. Her sister gave a little more detail about it. Being sisters, she stated that they were very close and told each other everything. Her older sister said that Claire indeed had been obsessed with that Ouija board, drinking energy drinks and staying up all night to talk to what she believed was her boyfriend, who had passed away earlier in the year. Her sister stated that Claire had been saying that her boyfriend was begging for her to come join him in the afterlife, and so she believed that's why Claire did what she did. Now, let me reiterate, this house felt wrong. Everything felt bad, and I had a very uneasy, sick feeling in the basement. And not because of the situation I was in. It wasn't my first, but this was a call that really stuck with me for a while. It really messed me up. We never really got much more of an explanation, and as cops, you kinda just have to move on to the next call. 2 weeks later, to the day, I get a call about a car accident with an ejection. I head to the call, code 3, lights and sirens, and I arrive to find a convertible BMW with the top down, which had experienced an obvious horrible crash and a rollover. It was sitting on its wheels, and in the driver's seat was a woman who clearly had a broken neck. Next to the vehicle, about 25 feet away, was a man who had been ejected. Keep in mind, this was a convertible, so he was ejected from the top of the car. I went to close off the scene with yellow tape. I walked about 75 yards away from the accident. There's no easy way to describe the accident, but it was just bad and violent. Upon obtaining the man's ID, I read the information off to dispatch, and then the other officer and I both realized the same thing at the same time. These two people were Claire's parents, who 2 weeks to the day from their daughter dying in a horrible way, had also suffered the same fate. Breaking the news to the older sister was heartbreaking. I kept in touch with her for a little while. She inherited her parents' estate and all of the insurance money. She ended up selling off everything and buying a different house to try and start over and repair her broken life. However, it doesn't end there. The sister? She was doing as well as could be expected. She was settled into a new place and just doing her best to move on. Around a month later, another officer was called after a pedestrian was struck by a car while she was jogging. And yeah, you guessed it, it was the sister. She managed to survive for several weeks in a coma, but ultimately, she didn't make it. Now, you may have figured out why the doctor story was relevant, but the house that Claire's family lived in was the same house as that doctor. That was a few years ago now, and I'm no longer a police officer. I moved a couple states away, but I still think about Claire and her family every once in a while. It definitely seems like that house is cursed, or Claire was talking to something more than her boyfriend on that board. Dispatch sent me to a call in a mountain area late one night. Dispatch said the caller reported several people holding a baby above their heads and chanting while standing on her property. The call sounded ridiculous, and I smirked as dispatch gave me the details. I arrived at the proper address after driving for about 20 minutes along a mountain road. There is not much else up here, and it's extremely quiet. No one walks around out here, and there aren't very many cars driving this late. I walked along the gated driveway. Through a light wooded area, I found the caller's house with 2 dim lights near the front door. The house was surrounded on 3 sides by heavy woods. I felt a little uneasy just looking at the house. I knocked on the front door of the house. While standing on a large patio, I heard something move to my left, which startled me because it was close. It sounded like a person, something big. I looked to the left and used my flashlight to light up the patio, but I didn't see anything. I continued to knock. I could hear 2 voices inside the house. I clearly heard a male and a female. This made me feel a little better. I thought I heard someone on the patio, but it must have been the people inside the house. The female eventually opened the door. She was terrified, almost crying. She asked me to come inside and close the door. She led me to the living room where I saw a very cheap security monitor, almost like a baby monitor camera setup, with audio and video playing. The camera setup only provided a live feed. The camera was positioned to view the front door and the patio area where I was just standing. The audio was silent as I watched the monitor for a few seconds. The woman began to explain when I interrupted and asked where the male was inside the house. I heard his voice. She looked confused and said that she was here alone. I was surprised because I know for a fact I heard a male's voice when I knocked. I asked her several times and initially thought she was lying to me. My partner checked the house and he didn't find anyone. The woman said she was reading while sitting on the couch when she heard something over the security camera. She looked at the display and saw 2 people on the patio standing at the front door. She heard knocking at the door and called the police. I looked at the monitor and although it was low quality, I could see the patio and the front door with decent clarity. As the woman continued to explain, the audio on the monitor went from quiet to extremely loud. We all stopped talking. The caller was shaking. I looked at the monitor but didn't see anyone. Loud audio continued to blast from the speakers. The audio sounded like wind, but it was not windy that night. I asked her, "What is that?" And she said, "It's them." I looked at my partner, who was visibly nervous. Then the woman hands me her cell phone, stating that she took a picture of the monitor showing the 2 people on her patio. I looked through several low-quality pictures and didn't see anything. I continued to scroll, and sure enough, I see what looks like 2 tall figures standing at her door. One of the figures is clearly holding something. The figures looked very strange though, all dark and featureless in contrast to the video I saw on the monitor. I was in disbelief and thought, oh my god, she's telling the truth. I continued to scroll and saw one figure holding something up over its head. Another picture showed the item at the base of the door with both figures standing near it. I tried to reason, to explain it away, what could have caused these images, but it was pretty apparent that there had been 2 subjects on her patio. We check outside, walking the property to the tree line. I mentioned the movement on the patio and the male's voice from inside the house. My partner just asked me to stop talking about it. We finished checking the perimeter and returned to speak with the caller. She says that she will be driving into town and staying at a hotel because she's too scared to stay here alone tonight. We walk along the driveway back to our cars. My partner jumps into the patrol car and takes off. I laughed, but I felt really uneasy standing there in the dark. I leave shortly afterward. I don't know of anything else happening later. I assume the woman returned home the next day, but I haven't spoken to her since the call came out. If dispatch doesn't send me, I typically never follow up and talk to the person again. I did check the history of the address and learned that there was a few calls there over the past few years, financial crimes against an elderly person, also several welfare checks, nothing really alarming history-wise. I could not tell what the item was while reviewing the pictures. It looked to be the same size as a baby, consistent with the initial report from dispatch, but it seemed so wild, I don't know. I've seen a lot of strange things. I found there's usually an explanation for what we see. Adrenaline, fear, and a little imagination can really mess with people. I think cops are moderately less prone to this because we deal with it weekly and daily, numerous times a shift. This call was exciting because I just couldn't explain it. Everything seemed real. I heard a male's voice, I saw people standing on the patio, they held something. It was scary, although fun and exciting at the same time. Everything checked out. I have been on patrol for several years and I love stuff like this. I hope to go back. And if I ever do, I'm sure I'll update. I was on call when I was a homicide detective one night. When I got a call from dispatch, I was told that it was an older gentleman that called 911 and said his wife was dead and that it was his fault. Dispatch asked if there's anyone else in the home and he stated yes, but when asked who, he said nobody. I get there and she's on the couch with a visible head trauma and very much not alive. Nothing crazy though. The first thing I always do at a scene is go room to room and make sure that my crime scene isn't being contaminated and verify that there is nobody else inside. I had deputies out in the garage with the suspect who was being very polite and cooperative. I check all of the rooms and everything looks okay, so the lieutenant and I are standing in the kitchen discussing the case. The way the house was set up, you can't see the front door from the kitchen, but it's just off to the right of it with a partial wall separating the rooms. The living room is directly in front of the entryway, maybe 15 feet from the door. So, as I'm standing there talking with the lieutenant, when all of a sudden we hear the front door creak and open. I get angry because I think some clueless deputy is either walking into a crime scene or is letting someone else wander in. So, as soon as I round the corner, I see the door now about a foot open and I see nobody around. I figured someone must have walked away after they opened it, but there was an enclosed screen porch before you can get out the door. The screen door was locked from the inside, so there's no way anyone was able to get into the main front door. So me and the LT are both puzzled and figure must have been the wind. Maybe the door wasn't latched all the way, but just looked closed. However, when I put my hand on the door to push it, I felt it was a very heavy-duty steel exterior door. So there's no possible way that the wind pushed it open. Even weirder is there's a straight line from the couch to the door. So we are immediately creeped out because there's no reasonable explanation as to why that door opened. So I shake it off and go into the garage and interview the husband/suspect at length. As it turns out, and the evidence fully supports his explanation, she slipped and hit her head when she was getting out of the shower, and she didn't want to go to the hospital and wanted to go to sleep, so he let her. So he felt that he was responsible for her death. That's why he said it was his fault. He was probably 75 to 80 years old, but extremely lucid and clearly had no cognitive issues. We discussed his military time and some of his life when I first sat down with him, just trying to build a rapport. So before I got up, I told him there was one last thing I had to clear up, which was the 911 call when he said that they weren't home alone. He laughed and said that I'd think he was crazy, but I explained that after over an hour of speaking with him, I felt that he certainly was not crazy. So he loosened up a little bit and then began to explain how there are these little people that lived in his house. Obviously, I looked skeptical, but he explained that he's never actually seen them, but they're mischievous. They do things like flush the toilets and take items out of the cupboard, move things around and open doors. I'm sure my eyes went as wide as pie plates at this point. He then asked me if anything happened when I was inside the house because he thought he heard the front door open earlier. I just nodded and he thanked me profusely, saying he's glad that I experienced it too, so he knows he's not losing his mind. At that point, my death case was determined to be accidental, and the best I can figure is that the little people opened the front door so the dead wife's spirit could walk outside. So, as quickly as I could, I got out of his haunted house.